welcome to the Fam Lab. If you are wondering who we are, you should listen to the previous episode where we introduce ourselves and what have you, because we're just going to get into it this episode. We are excited about this topic, and apparently most parents are. We're going to be talking about technology and screen time and get into some of the nitty-gritty and the practical stuff of how to deal with technology, how to parent with technology in mind, and those sorts of things. So we want to kind of start on a fun and light note and talk about what was the first phone that you had. Now, before we answer that question, remember you can rate, review, subscribe to this podcast on Stitcher and on iTunes. And we look forward to hearing from you at hellofamlab@gmail.com. You can tell us what your first phone was, and you can also tell us what you want to hear us talk about. So, Kyle, what was your first phone?
I remember two different phones as my first phone. I'm not sure which one it was. I had two phones. I was so rich. Just kidding. No, my first phone, I think it was this one. It was an old Samsung, and it was one of those that you could throw against a brick wall and it would never break. Crazy. Maybe that was Nokia. I don't remember. I did that to my first phone. But my other phone that I think was my first phone, I'm just going to say is phone number two, was an LG, and it was very different from everything else because the asterisk, 0, and pound sign were on the right side of the keypad rather than below it. And people didn't like that because it was different. So
That seems dumb.
it was fun. I liked it because it was different. One thing you'll learn about me on this podcast is I'm pretty different. So if you're different too, you'll fit right in.
Kyle, how old were you when you first got a phone?
I believe I was 13, maybe. I think I was going into 8th grade. I think that's about what time it was.
I think what we should have probably clarified for the older ones of us here is that we meant the first cell phone you had, because that wasn't always the phone. Your phone used to be your home phone, but you had to call it a cell phone or a mobile phone to know it was. And now it's interesting. We don't even differentiate that anymore.
Oh, yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, your phone is your phone. But I was out of college when I got my first cell phone, and I was teaching and driving about 30 minutes one way to work. And so as a single girl out there by myself, I thought I needed a phone. So I really splurged and got a cell phone because not everyone had them at that time. So I was an adult when I first had my phone. And I think it was Ericsson, and it was a brick phone. It was all definitely one piece and had the hard antenna on it. And yeah, it was big phone, heavy. Didn't fit in your pocket for sure.
I get the distinction of being the youngest person on this podcast, but I got my first phone when I was going into the 7th grade, and it was because I was starting to do athletics and different things at school, and so my parents gave me their hand-me-down phone, and it was a Motorola flip phone with a black and white screen. And then I can remember the first phone that I got to pick out was, I believe it was a Nokia, but it was a Propel, whoever made the Propel, and it was cool because it slid up vertically and the keys were behind the slider, and so that was a really cool thing to have the slide up phone. I think I got that when I was going into the 9th grade.
Okay, so I guess I have the distinction of being the oldest on this panel, and my very first cell phone, just like Mikie, was out of college. I started my first job, and I had a sorority sister who was working for a cell phone company. No one had cell phones back then, and it was a big old Motorola brick phone that had a big bag, and you had to carry the bag with you everywhere you went, and it cost about half of my paycheck at the time. It was so expensive to have that phone. So I think I probably got you all beat. Barrett, we'll see.
And your phone was also cranking out the most radiation of any phone of
Absolutely.
all time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Super dangerous phone. My first phone, to go back to Mikie making the distinction, I remember having like a big deal that I had a phone in my room. And it was like right before, and I had talked to my best friends like on the phone for hours. It was probably like 20 minutes. But when you're in like 6th grade, it seems like a long time. But I had a weird like forest green phone for like the seeing impaired. The numbers were enormous on this thing. And I just remember being like, wow, why did they make them so big? Anyways, that was like my first phone in my bedroom. And I thought that was a huge deal. And I could like 3-way call people. That was fun. Then I had just the generic LG flip phone for a little bit. Obviously, it was same age as Matt was when he got his. I got mine going into like middle school sports, and my parents were gonna have to be picking me up, and where would I be on campus and that sort of thing. And I never answered it when they called anyway. And I was just so bad at having a phone for the first couple of years. You're just you don't understand. You're just terrible at it. And you would accidentally. I remember when you would accidentally open the internet on the phone, and it would cost $9 billion because you would accidentally click on internet and it would start loading, and you'd be like, no, and you would hang up immediately. And it was so expensive, just instantaneously, like cost 3 times the phone bill trying to access it. So I broke that one almost immediately. And the phone that I remember and have the most memories with is the LG NV3. And I think about that phone a lot because you could type on the front, and then if the text got too big, you had to turn it horizontally and slide it up, and then you could finish your text. That is the most inconvenient thing of all time. But it did stop me from like texting and driving a lot. So I liked the LG NV3, but that was my first phone. So a lot of phone talk, and that's on purpose. We are going to get into screen time and technology. And we've asked Matt to kind of moderate, and we're going to try and hit on a couple of different age groups and what technology usage looks like in those age groups, and as well as some real practical stuff on parenting with technology from all of us, but specifically Rosalyn. And so, Matt, I will turn this episode over to you, my man.
Thanks. We are really excited about this conversation. It's a conversation that is one that is not only important, but I think it's increasingly relevant because just like all of us shared, your phone is a major rite of passage, but it's not anymore. It's something that the amount of access to technology is almost comes with birth now. And so one of the things that kind of made us want to start here with this conversation is there's a piece of research from the Barna Research Group, which does a lot of research around Christian topics, that in their poll of parents regarding the topic of what makes it most difficult to raise kids today, over 65% of respondents answered technology and social media, and that was the number one answer to what makes it most difficult to raise kids today. And so that's where we wanted to start it on this FamLab podcast about how to raise kids and use technology in a God-honoring way. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is screen time, because if we're all honest, we spend a lot of time with screens in front of us, and now we probably, if you have an iPhone or another type of smartphone, you may get the statistics that pop up about how much screen time you've had this week and different things. And so I think we're all becoming more conscious of our screen time. But we'd like to start by talking about screen time with younger kids. And so I'm going to kick it over to Mikie around the question of how much screen time is appropriate for younger kids, and how as parents do we monitor that in a healthy way.
I heard a report just this week that toddlers ages 2 and under are now on average having 3 hours of screen time a day. And that was really surprising to me initially, until I started thinking about my own screen time and just how much time, even outside of what I do for work at the computer, but what I do casually just to pass the time with screen time. And wow, you get to 3 hours pretty quick if you add all of that up. And if you think about all the time that we do hand our kids the phone, it happens a lot. Matt, you mentioned that kids have a phone almost since birth. Well, it's really true. I mean, my little ones got our hand-me-down phones. We didn't want to just throw them away or, even put them in recycling if they're still working and they have apps on them that they could use. My son did have an iPhone when he was a toddler. I mean, it was the original iPhone. It was very old. And we did put it in a big rubber turtle-shaped case so that if he dropped it or threw it, it wouldn't break. But we still have that little iPhone, and he had games on it. There are a lot of good things with technology and kids. I really feel like our son taught himself to read using apps that we put on his phone. He was reading really early and knew his letters early. And I think a lot of it was due to some of the interaction he had with technology. But if we teach our kids that they need to have noise all the time, or they need to have something flashing in their faces all the time, that gets to become a habit really fast and really early. So it's something to be careful about.
So you would give him the phone when he was 2 at a restaurant or something?
We actually,
that's what we do.
We really limited restaurant time. Sorry.
No.
But I mean, a lot of people do that, with the restaurants, because it does help with holding their attention. But we avoided using it at table time. For us, it was in the car. We drive a lot. We commute almost everywhere we go, and we go on long car trips. And that's when our kids get the most technology time, is in the car, driving.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I feel like same is true for my kids. I've got an 8 and 2-year-old, and Eden, my 2-year-old, she definitely has a short attention span, and so trying to corral her or get her to just sit down for any short period of time, she's got to have some sort of screen, I feel like. And Lee and I do, I think, a great job. Like, she does a lot better job than I do of monitoring that, but it is a big issue for sure.
So how do you think, as parents, one of the things that you guys have mentioned is it can be a nice distraction for our kids, right? And it can be also something that is educational and adds value. So what are some of the things, or what are some of the signs to notice when it's beginning to have a detrimental effect? Or what are some of the things that parents should watch out for when considering screen time for their kids, especially at a young age?
I think it's really important that parents make sure their kids know that the parent is in charge of the technology. Even if they give it to the kid to hold, it's not their phone, it's still your phone, and you're in charge of when they can use it and when they can't. And that's always your decision as a parent, not their decision as a child. And I think if you're consistent with that from the very beginning, then it's something that your child will grow to expect. And, my kids know if we say turn it off, because when they didn't turn it off, we took it away and it was gone for a long period of time. So it's just being consistent and staying in charge of the technology, making sure that they understand you're in control of it, they aren't.
Okay, maybe let's go up with the age group a little bit, and let's talk about screen time for middle school and high school students. And so we have the blessing of having both a middle school and a high school minister on this podcast, but also a parent who's had middle school and high school students. So let's open it up. What are some things to watch for with screen time with maybe your 10 to 18-year-old kids?
Well, as a parent who's had the pleasure of raising a teenage children, but a teenage son in particular, who enjoys, looking at his phone and playing video games, lots of video games, you have to watch for personality changes. And I think that this can come really a lot quicker than I think a lot of parents think it can come about. I know that we have a really great, sweet son, but I've noticed that if he is on a video game for more than about an hour and a half, he gets kind of mean. And I mean, his personality just changes and he will snap. And, to remedy that, we figured out that he needs not to go long periods of time playing video games or being on his phone. So that's just one of the things that we've had to deal with and look out for.
Yeah, I think that's smart of regulating that for sure. I know I do work specifically with middle school students, and I only have an 8-year-old, but attention span is definitely an issue. And so one thing that I do just practically in class is they don't get their phones in class just because it's easy to get distracted by it. I mean, I get distracted by my phone right now. I've gotten a couple notifications, and I'm like, oh, what is that? It doesn't even matter. I need to be able to break away from that. And so I think, regulating that time, figuring out how to make sure that they're not so focused on that they don't even know what's going on around them. That could be a frustrating thing as a parent, because you're trying to tell them, hey, you need to go do this or quit what you're doing, and they're not even listening to you. That can be real frustrating.
I think that's really great, Kyle. And I think talking to kids about that and about those choices with their time and why you're setting limits for choices on the time for that is really important, and making the priorities. Right now, your time priority is class, so we're not going to have technology. And I think that's, Rosalyn, what you said about their demeanor and just their mood gets affected by that technology time. I noticed that with my younger kids too. And I'll talk to them about it afterwards and just say, look, I know it's time for turning it off. You turned it off, but now you're so cranky. Look how spending that much time on your tablet has made you feel kind of cranky. So talking through those feelings with them and why you're making those expectations and rules.
One thing I can absolutely say too is that, on rare occasion, we've had to take that video game or cell phone away for extended periods of time. There's not one time that we've done that we didn't end up with a happier kid at the end of that time. So, even though it's difficult and they hate it and they push back and they'll challenge you, it is completely worth it to take that on and to get that kid back that you knew before that video game or screen time was introduced to them.
That's great. Yeah. Just as a parent, never being afraid to use that as a consequence. It is a tool, and technology is a tool. The things that we are using are tools. So, it's a privilege, I guess. That's something that we do as a family ministry, especially middle school and high school. We take up phones on our trips, and like Rosalyn was saying, we see an immediate difference in personality and conversation, and just kind of an awakening almost of, oh man, my friends are here, and this is going to be good, and it may take an hour or two for them to adjust. But I wanted to do, Matt, if we have time, do like a positive negative sandwich here with some of the things that I notice with high school students, because like I said, it's a tool and it's used for a lot of positive things, and they have to have it just about at school, and that's something that we've talked about, just the expectation of, I need this to function today, in school and the things that I'm trying to do. So they get a lot of information from it, and they know what's going on in their friends' lives. They know, it wasn't too long ago that, the statistics were talking about, how much news for people our age and teens, come from sites like Twitter and Facebook and that sort of thing, whether that's good or not. But they do stay informed through this technology, and so that's huge. And then there's obviously, community that comes from social media and keeping up with friends that way. It's educational. They learn things like Mikie was talking about, from learning how to read to learning how to deal with difficult people. That is a positive, I think, of using social media and just learning how to interact with people. It's educational in that way. And there's also obviously unlimited resources as far as like learning other languages and learning how to, that there's tons of, Flipkart apps now that you can, study by using your phone and technology. And I think that's huge. And obviously it's fun. It's a lot of fun to be on technology. Rosalyn's mentioned the games, just keeping up with friends, watching videos, knowing what's going on. I think we would be crazy not to mention pornography as a negative. Obviously, I'm transitioning now, and it's a hard transition there. But, a lot of positive things about technology, and so we can't forget that. We can't doom all technology. And I think we can do that sometimes as people that are a few steps down the road from high school students. We're like, well, back in my day, we didn't have that, and we didn't act that way. It's like we've fantasize about what it was like back in our day. But man, how great is it for them to have these positive things? But negatively speaking, I mean, it's so easy through every app to access some sort of level of inappropriate viewing, and a lot of that is pornographic through social media. It can be through hidden apps. It can be through other people sending your student pictures, whatever it is. There's a lot of easy access to that. Also, I think a big problem that high school students have is kind of falling into what you've probably heard called the comparison trap, and comparing their family, to somebody else's family, or their clothes to somebody else's clothes, their shoes to somebody else's shoes, and that weighs on their self-esteem, and it starts to have an impact on kind of their attitude about life. And oh man, here I am comparing. I always say, when I'm laying in bed eating a bag of Cheetos, right, and I'm comparing that to somebody else's highlight reel of what they've done all weekend. They've been out, hiking with their family, and they're all in love, and it's great. And it's like, well, my family's been inside all day, and here we are having a boring time, or whatever. Or this family went to the movies, and you start comparing that sort of thing. I thought Kyle brought up an excellent point with the attention span, that being a negative. Just we have to have a screen to look at, a phone to look at, and something that I've learned recently is a huge deal in school as far as a negative for technology. Some of my teacher friends were talking about students coming to school and falling asleep all the time, and like way more and more, and especially later in the day, they just cannot stay awake. And so the teachers have started, asking, and it's just become like this epidemic of students sleeping with their phones and sleeping with their screen and sleeping with a TV going or whatever it is, and they're up until 2, 3, 4, and then they go to school and they learn nothing because they're so tired and they're just worn out. So I think there's positives, there's negatives. Obviously, there's boundaries that need to be set. And I just want to say, be ready as parents to have alternative options for if you're going to take technology away because of these negatives. Remember the positives that you have to then kind of replace, and have an alternative to information, community, education, fun. Like, what are you going to provide for them? If you're taking their phone away, that's great. Now, allow them to go and interact face to face. That's one of the things that people get kind of hung up on. In my day, we would actually talk to people. That's great. Allow them that opportunity then. Put them in have people over to the house. Allow them to have friends over. Take them, drive them around to meet with friends, and provide that opportunity for community and those sorts of things. So that's like my whole spill on it right now.
Barrett, I love that. And I in particular, I love the comment you made about not comparing your family to other families when it comes to anything, but technology is included in that. And as parents, you have to have confidence in what you're doing, and you have to know what your values are, and you have to set those values for your family and the needs that your family has. So, I think about my oldest daughter, 7th grade. She still didn't have a phone first semester of 7th grade. And we were kind of, this has been a little while ago, but we were trying to decide, does she need a phone? And she convinced me, Mom, I am the only student at the school that does not have a phone. And, we've talked a lot about the phone. Well, I almost believed that until I went to the school and was waiting on her and had a conversation with another mom whose son said that he was the only one at school without a phone. You have to do what is best for your family's values, your family's needs, and you just cannot get into that comparison game with your kids.
I probably should have said this in our introductory episode, because it's something that I wish I could stamp on every episode, and maybe it's a tagline, I don't know. But every family's different. Every child is different. And especially when I was, 7 months ago, 8 months ago, had my, firstborn, man, was that just even highlighted. And I knew that was going to be the case, but, there's all these different plans for, how do you get your baby to sleep or whatever. It's the same with technology. That's just extrapolated, maybe even more so as kids get older and that sort of thing, that every kid is different. Every situation is different. But absolutely, do your research, ask other parents, go to the school. What is the reality? You have to know that piece of it. But then what's the reality for you as a parent? What's the reality for your student? And just be willing to do whatever it takes to set boundaries and limits, and find out what the positives are for your student using technology, and what are the negatives. Maybe they're, in the percentage of students that don't have that struggle with pornography, and they've never, tapped into that, and they've never accessed that. Great. That's awesome. And by all means, just praise them for that. I think that's important too. But being willing to realize that every situation is different is huge.
And I think communicating with your kids what your expectations are, what those boundaries are going to be, and being really clear about it is so important. But that means you have to be intentional and think through that on your own first. What are your boundaries going to be? What are your expectations? And being ready to justify that for your kids, and not just setting out rules willy-nilly just at every occurrence that comes up, but being intentional and thinking through things in advance.
Consistent too. Sorry.
Yeah, so let's stay there for just a second, and let's think about it kind of in two ways. What are some factors that should go into putting together a strategy for your family when it comes to technology? And then the second part of that is, how does the parent play into leading in that environment? What are some boundaries that you think parents need to put on themselves, or how can we make sure we're not the ones that are on our phones too much and telling our kids not to be on their phones? And so let's just kind of talk a little bit about putting together that strategy, and then we'll dive more into specifics that got brought up in the conversation to this point. Let's talk about strategy.
I have some friends, family members that both, when they get home from work, both parents work, their phones go into the kitchen, into a community area, and they don't touch them until the end of the day. And rarely, I've been at their house, and they put it down in the kitchen, like it's like in the central area where everyone can see it, and they leave it there. And then after the kids go to bed, sometimes one of my friends, he would get on it if he wants to check a sports score or wants to know what's going on. And that's hard for me because I want to take pictures, and I want to share with my friends, and I mean my family, my mom, lots of my family, they live not close by, and so it's an easy way to share what's going on. But I need to put my phone down and spend time with my kids, but putting it somewhere and then being very intentional. All right, we are not going to touch these until after the kids go to bed, or I'm not going to do it while they're at home from school. I don't know, just being intentional about that. And I think that's one thing that I've tried, and it's worked when I've done it. It doesn't work when I don't do it, obviously.
I really love that, Kyle, and I also love the point Mikie made just about not being, I think you said, willy-nilly with the rules. I kind of like that, and kind of really putting some thought into it, and kind of having a comprehensive plan, for your home. I know one of the things that we've done is that we just don't do kids' screen time in their bedrooms. Like no TVs in their bedrooms, their computers they use in public areas in our home. They leave their phones. Now I have one in college, so I mean, we're transitioning into adulthood with her. But typically they leave their phones downstairs, don't take their phones to their bedrooms. They charge them at night, and that kind of plays into what Barrett talked about with kids being tired, during the day, because their, phones are dinging at night and all of that. So that's something that could be helpful with that. But I think just having a plan for your family. One of the other things we did is, particularly when my children were younger, we had no TV time Sunday nights through Thursday nights. Just didn't. We talked, we did homework. We
crazy.
Tried to be consistent with throwing in that occasional devotional, but they just knew they could read a book and do other things, but we had no screen time. So,
man, that's awesome. I think part of the strategy that we're talking about is one. What's so important is, like, you cannot go and present your bill of rights to your students. Like, hey, here's 14 things that we're committed to. I guess you could do that, but they have zero buy-in, right? So I encourage families to do it together, right? You're sitting down, and that's an intentional conversation about, and then you get to suggest, hey, here's 14 things that I think are fair. Now let's talk through them and get their feedback up front so that they have buy-in, and being willing to, say to your student, look, we're doing this because we want to be stronger as a family. We want to focus on spiritual things, or whatever you want to focus on. We think you need your rest. We think it's better for our attitudes as a family, whatever reason, but doing it together, creating the strategy together, sitting down, having the conversation together, I think is huge. And then part of that strategy has to be the alternatives, right? I think kind of giving not necessarily rewards, but just having an idea up front of, okay, if I'm not allowing my student to have their phone in the bedroom, then I'm not allowed to have mine in there or whatever. And then so that means that I'm going to replace that phone time with reading my Bible or reading a fun book. The Bible's fun too. Oh boy. Oh, I can hear the comments now. Oh no. But, all of that sort of stuff, just creating healthy, fun alternatives to that time, I think has to be part of just kind of an overall tech strategy in the household.
I guess our strategy, our kids are still pretty young, but our strategy is that our kids always ask permission before using any kind of technology.
That's good. I like that one.
Yeah, and they're just used to it now. It's not a big deal for us, but they always ask, "Mom, can I have tablet time?" And then if we say yes, they always know there's going to be a timer. And now they know how to set their own timers, which is awesome. But sometimes we'll talk about, what would be a reasonable amount of time right now? Well, what do we have going on? Where do we need to be? Okay, you can have 20 minutes right now. Or, okay, maybe this is just a 10-minute time. So, but we set a timer every time they have technology time too. My poor kids, they don't get much TV time either. So if we're out at a restaurant that has a TV, they are glued to it. They don't know how to have
Mouth open.
They can't have TV and other stuff going on, but that's a life skill we need to work on. But just that's kind of our boundary is just it's always permission based.
So as any good strategy, it has periodic check-ins. What are some practical ways? Is it actually taking your student's phone if they're older and monitoring what they're looking at? Is it sitting down as a family periodically and asking the question, how are we doing on our technology strategy? What are some ways that we check in to make sure things are working correctly?
I thought when my kids were really little that I needed to play every game that they were going to play before they played it to make sure it was okay. They are just now 6 and 8, and I already can't keep up with all of the different stuff. I just can't be in every app that they're in and experience it. But what I do and try to do is talk to them about it so that they know I'm going to be asking them questions. What kind of game is this? What do you do? What do you like about this? And they are into an app right now that actually has interaction with other people. So when they're online, there are other people in the game with them, other kids, which has made me really nervous. So that's one game that I really monitor closely, and we have talked about that. And actually, they aren't doing the talking back and forth even when their friends are in there. But I don't know how you could do every activity that they're going to do with them, but just being in constant communication about what they're using their technology for, something we do.
Yeah, something that I think is just another. It's a version of that, I guess. It's a step beyond that, or for maybe a strategy for a teenager is asking them to give you a tour of their phone, and there's a lot of different ways to do that, I guess. But saying, hey, like, what are the apps that you use? What do you like? Can I see, your Instagram, and take me just to your page, the things that you've posted, and hopefully, you're following them, and that's part of the expectation of, hey, if you're going to have it, then I have access to it, and that starts like what Mikie was saying at a younger age of, hey, we're in control of the technology and that sort of thing, and it is a privilege. And so as they get older, just asking, hey, walk me through and let them show you what they want to show you, and if you want to see something in particular, let them show it to you and take you to it. And I think that helps with the trust, and instead of just like, hey, let me see your phone, I'm going to go through your phone. Are there times where that's absolutely necessary, and are there students where that's necessary? Absolutely, for sure. And so I'm not bashing that by any means, but I think just allowing them to kind of walk you through it periodically, and just and having that as part of your expectations up front in the conversation that you have when you're giving them the phone, and then you're checking in, so that it's not a surprise. And maybe say, hey, I'd really like to have a tour of your phone tomorrow. Even giving them the space and giving them the time to be like, oh, I should probably get rid, or whatever. I think that's okay. That's fair for them to kind of self-monitor and take care of those things and kind of edit themselves. And then just, hey, walking through it. I think that's really practical. I read that somewhere. I stole it from somebody, but I like it.
I was going to say, I think that's great. And, I think whatever you do as a parent, you should do something to show your kids that you have interest in what they're doing on their phones and what their screen time is. Because, that's just one of the ways that we show our kids that we care about them, that we show that interest, that we let them know we care about your mental health and your physical health and your well-being overall, and we want to know what you have going on.
Yeah.
So it's just important.
What game are you playing?
Right.
I saw Reese playing that game this
Oh,
weekend.
boy.
Yeah, what are you playing? What's your high score? Can I beat it?
Exactly.
So I like what Rosalyn said about, just check-ins on health and different things, with social media being almost considered an extension of a person in some ways. What are some good ideas for how you can encourage your kids through social media, or how you can maybe monitor their emotional well-being, or just how do you navigate kids growing up with almost that additional outlet or additional world that comes with being in that sphere?
I recently listened to something that talking about social media and the positives of it, like Barrett was talking about earlier, but how it broadens their worldview, and so they're able to know what's going on. And they're able to be aware of things that are going on in different countries and just different things. So I think this is what you're asking of, how do we help them, or what are the positives of it? Getting them outside themselves and showing them ways that they could be an encourager to other people, or they may see something on YouTube, or they may be interacting with somebody in a game, and it sparks an idea for them to help someone that they know at school, or maybe their brother or sister or something, and take advantage of those opportunities. My oldest daughter Grace, she was writing a story, and to me, she's never written stories a whole lot, but she likes to read. But she wrote her own story, and it was about these friends that ended up liking each other, and it was a little cheesy, whatever. She was smiling like crazy. She was like, "Dad, I know you don't like this," but I was like, "It's okay, it's okay." But she was developing that story of these two people. I don't know. It's made me feel really good that she's developing a skill that she can use later on in life. It's not just her mind is going to mush because she's playing a game. Like, she's developing something that she enjoys. And I know it's because that she has seen that somewhere, or she's interacted with friends that talk about writing stories. I don't know. So using that to help them develop something that they could use later on in life. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Man, I think my mind went 1,000 different directions. Matt, you're asking, how do I use social media to encourage your kids? Yeah, too.
Yeah, and just to an extent, what Kyle mentioned, Hallie, Rosalyn's daughter's an artist. It can be an incredible platform for sharing their art, or doing different things through that. So, I think a lot of times we monitor our kids' social media solely for the purpose of making sure they're doing things okay. How do we encourage them by learning more about them through social media or different things like that?
Yeah.
Well, something that made me think of, is a parent of younger kids who aren't on social media really yet, is that I need to be careful about what I post about my kids now, because they are going to see it, in 10 years when they're online, and their friends and their spouses and their future employers might see it. And especially if I put their names next to it and that sort of thing, and it can come back later. So I think we as parents need to think, forward thinking about what we're posting right now about our young kids even.
Yeah, just creating an expectation of encouragement on social media, being very positive about all of our relationships on social media with, in our marriages and with our friendships. And, there's a lot of, there's kind of a culture on Facebook of commenting on other people, right? And that was a really positive spin to put on that. But, really bashing people that we, so-and-so, or not even so-and-so, just random person did this today and it really annoyed me. and just creating a positive atmosphere on your social media and sharing that with your kid as an older kid. They're going to notice those things if they're friends with you on Facebook, if they're following you on Instagram. And I shy away a lot from, and this is sorry, Matt, from your question and kind of going back into what we were getting into earlier. I shy away from a lot of Snapchat conversation because it is hard to find redeemable qualities in Snapchat. And I have some good mentors and great parents that I just taught a parenting class with, and their kids have it, and they have Snapchat, and they have found a great way to use Snapchat as a family to communicate. And they say, and they said in the class that one of their kids communicates better through Snapchat than with text. And so they all got it to communicate with him through Snapchat, and that was great. And that's probably the best way for me to communicate with my brother. He's better through Snapchat than like texting or returning a phone call and that sort of thing. So maybe, that's one of the redeemable qualities. But man, those photos disappear forever, and you can set a timer. And, outside of a screenshot, which is, sometimes hard to get, I don't know, there's just not a lot of positive there. So just one red flag heads up on Snapchat. It's hard to monitor well, and it's hard to use well. It's hard to use in an encouraging way. It's hard to use in a really positive way. Like I said, I've seen it done. I've heard about it being done well. But that's why when I reference social media, it's usually Facebook, which is where parents are, and there's fewer teens. Twitter is kind of coming and going, and it has a particular audience. Instagram, very popular, and then Snapchat's very popular with teens. It's very popular in middle school and high school, but it's not for parents, and that's why it's kind of this like last little island of there's teens only, and there's some parents at our church that use it and use it well, and have a good social media kind of presence on Snapchat. And I think that's great, and that may be a positive way. If you're using a platform and using it well, and your kids see that, hey, he's on here and he's active. As a dad, as a mom, it's kind of harder to use it for inappropriate things if you're on there, and that takes time. It takes being consistent. It takes using it, but that may be part of a strategy.
So we could spend a lot of time on this conversation, obviously, but there are 3 topics that I'd like for us to make sure we include before we end our conversation today. The first of those has to do with actually consuming media together as a family, with Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all the different cable options. There are a million different things that people could watch, and it's almost like there's so much individualized content. How do you sit down as a family and enjoy media together? Or what does that process look like? Or how are you doing in your home?
That's just not always really easy with the content that we have on television today and on, like you said, Netflix and all of those media outlets. There was a time, kind of like what Mikie talked about, where I would try to watch something or even read something before I allowed my kids to do it. And in some ways, we still kind of do that. If there's something in particular that my son wants to watch, sometimes we'll say, okay, we'll kind of check it out. And there have been some times we go, absolutely no, that's not anything I would watch, and that's not anything we found appropriate for anyone to watch. So, we're not going to consume that. So, it's not an easy thing. I wish I had more wisdom on that, but it's really hard. Other than to say that I know that there's some tools that you can use, like is it VidAngel and ClearPlay, that kind of help take away some of the bad stuff in the content. So those things I think are really valuable for families.
Yeah, that's a real practical. There's several of those too, and you can find all of that by Googling like accountability software, and just Google VidAngel. There are free options for some of that stuff too. It may limit the types of media, but some of those bigger ones that you do kind of pay to play, that's a really practical way to enjoy media together, and it can kind of edit things for you, take that stuff out of it, for sure. I think just asking and kind of taking. I think this is real simple. Real practical, and everybody probably does this, but I think it's worth mentioning. Like, you get to pick sometimes what the family watches, and they get to pick sometimes. And, that is part of enjoying it together. It means you have to watch something that like something just terribly stupid, or whatever it is that's just not worth your time. But that's part of enjoying it together, because they're going to watch some of your, more adult themed, and I mean that in a very appropriate way, but, something real, boring to them. And so you're going to return the favor, that sort of thing. And that doesn't mean watching it and making fun of it the whole time either. Because then you're just creating this atmosphere of cynicism and sarcasm and that sort of thing. But enjoying it, I like the way you phrased the question, Matt, of learn to enjoy it together and enjoy kind of the intake process together and have feedback afterwards. I think is fun. That's what me and my wife enjoy doing. And so I'm looking forward to, hey, what did you think of this movie? What did you think of the show? If you didn't like it, why? And just kind of, enjoying and learning entertainment together.
I think what you said about having conversations after watching something together is really important. There are a lot of even kids' movies today that might have a message that your family might not agree with. And sometimes kids pick up on those messages and sometimes they don't. So, we've experienced movies like that where we went and we watched it and the kids just thought it was funny or not funny. And we left thinking that was kind of political, in the background. And so I would ask questions to see if my kids picked up on that or not. But just having conversations about what you thought was good or okay or not great about what you watched is important too.
When Barrett, we were talking about letting kids choose, or everyone gets a chance. Man, there was a movie that I did not want to watch at all. It's this Christmas movie about this reindeer thing, and Grace really wanted to watch it, and then I was like, this looks super dumb. And sorry if that's a curse word in your family. I just didn't want to watch it. But I sat down, we watched it over Christmas, and afterwards she was like, this is the best movie ever. She loved it. The main character was this little girl, and having conversations afterward in the midst of it, I remember asking her about that movie and different shows, like, well, why do you like this? And again, who's the main character's name? Like, just asking her practical questions so that I can kind of know what's going on, even if I don't care, or even if it's not as important to me as it is to her. So, yeah, like you said, Rosalyn, it's hard to find that time, but I don't think you have to watch a giant movie. You can watch just a little bit of it, and at least be involved, interacting.
I agree. And, we talked about, like, doing what's best for your family. But the fact is that we're not an island, and we have friends and communities of people that believe and that are Christian. And a lot of times I will ask, what other families, if there's a great movie, I will share that information, and I depend on my friends and others to do the same for us. So we can help each other in that way to recommend good quality viewing for our families.
Absolutely. Barrett, the second thing we were going to talk about was accountability, and you already started us down that path. I'm sure we'll have a whole nother conversation on pornography in the future, but what are some good web tips and different services that they can use to help their kids in that area?
Yeah, for sure. It is something that I am pretty passionate about because it has been helpful for my family, and then also when I was working in kind of a rehab setting for drugs, alcohol, and then sexual abuse and those sorts of things. One that we recommended a lot was Covenant Eyes, and they have a great website, first of all, so you can go to covenanteyes.com probably. I should have really looked it up before I plugged it, but just Google Covenant Eyes, and they have an excellent blog section. So if you were looking for statistics on pornography or articles about how do I deal with pornography, quote unquote, addiction, or my teen is struggling with this, and all the tough questions, but you're like, I don't want to type pornography into Google, which is smart. Don't do that. But go to Covenant Eyes, and you can kind of search their website and use that, which I think is extremely helpful and a good place to start. But then they also offer, and they're going to try and sell you their product, which is I guess it's a browser that you would download onto phones, on a computer, onto tablets. It's all across all these different mediums. and you can use Covenant Eyes will operate as your browser on your phone, and then send, if there's no inappropriate activity, there's not really like a report. But then if there is something that is flagged as a mature website or, an inappropriate search, then that's kind of flagged and sent to kind of a parental email. And that can be the student's email as well, and so that they can see kind of what's coming up. But it just kind of keeps, things, the biggest problem with a lot of the pornography stuff is it's kind of a secret thing. And so just kind of everybody being aware and being on the same page is huge. And so that's one that you pay for. I think it's like $12 a month or something like that. And for like unlimited access across all sorts of different, like computer and phone and for everybody, which is, not too expensive. But you can also just kind of Google accountability software, and there are other options. There's free options. There's a free phone one. There's a free for a desktop. And it's all kind of centered around this idea of let's bring our searching, which is now become such like an intimate, private thing for everybody's phone is their phone and everybody's screen is their screen. And so it's kind of my search life, and it's my, this is my personality on the internet or whatever. But it kind of brings that out into the light and just says, let's all be on the same page as a family. Let's, talk about what other people are searching. And so I've seen a lot of benefits from that. Highly recommend it, and just kind of holding each other accountable to what we're looking at and how we spend our time. It keeps up with time as well, which now like every iPhone does, but you can use it for a lot of different things.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that resource.
I think something else to think about with parental controls is that even with the best software, you're not always going to be able to prevent your child from accessing something that would be inappropriate or bad for them. So I think we also have to teach our kids strategies for what to do when they come across something like that, or what to do. Think about those comments that might come up and how do they respond, or should they respond? If they come across a site, even accidentally, that they know is inappropriate, what should they do? Who should they tell? Do they need to tell anybody? So just talking through that with your kids too, and just giving them some strategies when they do encounter things.
Just real quick, because that is such a good point of, if you're wanting to create a culture of confession in your family and have that openness, the accountability software helps kind of prevent it, but then there are ways around all of it all the time, and they can take it off their, I think you can make it where you can't take it off your phone, but, they take it off and they're like, oh, it accidentally happened, or whatever. There's all sorts of ways to get around stuff, or whatever happens, whatever comes up. It's okay to let your parents know like things that you have looked at or things that you did. And, and if you want that to be the case, the reaction to that is so important. And just being able to, like you said, have a plan in place for if that happens. Hey, I'm the parent to go to, or come and sit down with both of us, or, you can tell either of us, whatever it is, but walking through kind of the exit strategy, I guess, for what's happened afterwards.
And being ready not to overreact as a parent to those things. And, and helping your kids know that just because they came across something doesn't mean they're in trouble or that they are bad, but that there are things that they can do to avoid it in the future.
That's good.
And we will spend an episode in the future talking just about that, but we want to give you a few practical tips about it. And the last thing we'd like to end on is just a conversation about media literacy. Your kids are going to be looking for answers on the internet. How do they evaluate what is a good source? Or one of the things that we're all going to be dealing with as parents is instead of asking mom and dad, it's a lot easier to Google it. So how do we teach our kids what to look for when searching things on the internet?
Obviously, the personal blogs and like people's opinions stuff, they may be experts, or they may have some experience, but they're not verified in any ways. But you have to make sure that you're when you're writing a paper, or you're looking up something that you're not sure what it is or how to fix it or whatever it is, you look up scholarly websites. Like I don't know how regulated Wikipedia is. I know there is some good stuff on there, but there's also stuff that people just write on there, and it hasn't been as big of an issue, at least in my world. But if you do look up something and you're not sure if it's right, ask somebody about it. And I know that there are parenting websites, and there'll be articles on there of people giving their statistics and things. Don't just take things as face value. I mean, whether it's you as the student or you as the parent, make sure that you double check the source, however that looks like, whether that's somebody else or look up another website that has the same statistics or whatever. Don't just take it at face value.
I think it's such a good question because it's so hard for us even as adults, isn't
For
it?
sure.
I mean, we come across things all the time, and our initial reaction is sometimes to just believe it just because we read it, or maybe we trust the person who shared it. And kids get that way too, and even faster than we do. But there are things that we do need to teach our kids about: cross-checking resources, finding corroboration, and building those trusted things. But even some of our trusted sources anymore still have slant. So we have to give them tools to help them evaluate what they are reading and what they're taking as fact.
Now it's just technology is the quick fix, right? And we live in like a quick fix culture, and so having a quick answer and not having to wonder about anything is so important. It's key. I mean, that's like a big deal to just boom, get the answer really quick. And so I think as parents, setting the expectation of it's okay to take your time, it's okay to dig into something, is one, incredibly difficult, but two, kind of part of the strategy of, well, how do we teach our kids that it's not okay to just Google something and read the first thing and that's truth? Well, it's by taking the time to walk through that and explain all of that. And so I think it's just how do we spend our time in not even teaching media literacy, but just the common sense thing of going half a step further, spending a little bit more time to understand our sources and media and all of those things is going to be key.
Did you know that all 66% of statistics are made up on the spot?
That was a great joke to end on.
Well, thank you, Kyle, for a bit of levity and what
I believe that was said by George Washington.
Oh, okay. Now we're getting off the rails for sure. So, two quick resources to leave you with before Barrett reminds you about how to interact with this podcast. If you're a reader, 2 books we might recommend. The first is The TechWise Family. It's from the Barna Group. It's by Andy Crouch. And the second is Right Click: Parenting Your Teenager in a Digital Media World. This is by the Fuller Youth Institute. As with any resources, you got to use media literacy. There's good and bad, but there are some helpful things these that might fit your family. So Barrett, tell them how they can interact with the family.
Hey, thank you for listening. We hope that you got something out of this episode. We appreciate the time that you've spent listening, and we hope that you will rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. We hope that you will share this podcast with your friends, and we hope that it will be beneficial for you and your families. Again, this is the Fam Lab, where we're experimenting a family together and that sort of thing. So one, if you would, contact us. Let us know what you thought of this episode. Let us know the things that you want us to spend more time on and where you want to see future episodes go. You can email us at hellofamlab@gmail.com. It's all lowercase, hellofamlab@gmail.com. Fam, short for family, lab, short for Labrador. hellofamlab@gmail.com. Hey, again, thanks for listening. Much love. Have a great rest of your week.